Here are 4 common mistakes many people make when investing with Vanguard, although these tips can apply to any other platform. Some of these may seem obvious in hindsight, but they're not always common sense, especially the last one, which is a mistake that 9 out of 10 investors make without realizing it. Before we dive in, remember that I am not a financial advisor, and this video is for educational purposes only. Okay, let's dive into the first mistake, which centers around fund selection. As you know, here in the UK, Vanguard offers a decent range of index funds, ETFs, and even active funds. Although there aren't as many options as on platforms like Hargreaves Lansdowne, it can still feel overwhelming, not just for new investors, but even for experienced ones. The challenge is that some of these funds have similar objectives, and their names can often be confusing, leading to uncertainty about where to start. That's why you might be tempted to Google something like best Vanguard funds to invest in. But quite often, this will make it even more difficult to choose the right fund, because these articles often focus on the best performing funds without offering guidance on building a diversified and balanced portfolio. For example, you may be presented with various funds that track the same market, and if you don't fully understand the differences between them, you could end up with duplicated investments, which may result in a portfolio that is overweight or underweight in specific markets. As a quick example, you could end up investing in both the S&P 500 and the US Equity Index Fund. While both are great funds with excellent past returns, they are very similar. As you know, the S&P 500 tracks the 500 largest US companies, whereas the US Equity Index Fund tracks the entire US stock market, which includes large cap, mid cap, and small cap stocks. However, the 500 largest companies in the S&P 500 make up a significant portion, about 80%, of the US Equity Index Fund. So investing in both funds may not give you much extra diversification and could cause unnecessary overlap in your portfolio. In my opinion, the safest route for beginner investors and even experienced investors who aren't sure which funds to pick is often a global fund that provides exposure to a wide range of markets for a very low fee. But even here, you have to be careful, because not all of Vanguard's global funds are truly global. For example, when you go to the Global tab here on Vanguard's UK platform, you're presented with all these funds that are labeled as global. However, some of them, like these ESG funds, may focus only on companies that meet environmental, social, and governance criteria, and will not really include all the international companies that you may be expecting. For instance, they will leave out tobacco companies or those that are not really sustainable or ethical. Other global funds only focus on the developed world, leaving out the emerging markets, which account for 10% of the global investable universe. So by choosing a global fund that tracks only the developed world, you will miss out on companies like Taiwan Semiconductors, which are listed in countries that are classified as emerging. Therefore, it's really important to pay close attention to the fund names, objectives, portfolio data, and so on before investing in them to understand the markets they track and their overall strategy. Don't just pick random funds because they've performed well in the past. Consider how they fit into your overall investment strategy. Another mistake that new and experienced investors make is not reinvesting dividends. Most of the funds available on Vanguard's UK platform are now available in 2 versions: accumulation and income. The accumulation version will reinvest the dividends automatically back into the fund, while the income or distributing version will pay it out to your account. Now, if you're planning to invest for the next 20 to 30 years or even longer, and you are not invested in the accumulation version of a fund, it's really important to reinvest your dividends manually, as this will help grow your money faster through compounding. While it might be tempting to take the cash out and splurge on something enjoyable, this short-term gratification can come at the cost of long-term growth. Take a look at the following example. The chart shows the value of £10,000 invested in the UK stock market 30 years ago with dividend income reinvested against the value of the same £10,000 with the income taken out as cash. The difference is staggering. £106,000 compared to £35,500. As I mentioned earlier, the key reason behind this difference is that reinvesting dividends allows for compounding. This is when your returns generate additional returns, accelerating the growth of your investments. But there is also a psychological aspect to this. Psychologically, reinvesting dividends also helps reinforce the habit of thinking long term. Instead of focusing on short-term gains or taking small amounts of cash out of your investments, you are consistently reinvesting in your future, building wealth over time. Even if the market takes a downturn, knowing that you're accumulating more shares can help you stay the course. While the idea of reinvesting dividends might seem straightforward to seasoned investors, beginners often overlook the long-term impact of compounding. They might see dividends as passive income and may not realize how reinvesting them can exponentially grow their investments over time. So if you aren't investing in the accumulation version of your fund, make your life easier and consider switching, so that all the dividends are reinvested automatically for you. Otherwise, you run the risk of forgetting to reinvest them or just taking the money out and spending it. This leads me to the third mistake that many investors make: neglecting to set up a direct debit to automate their investments each month. This might seem silly, but it's not something that everyone intuitively does. Why is this so important? Well, one of the biggest challenges in investing is managing your emotions, particularly in response to market volatility. This is where automation can be a powerful tool, because by setting up a direct debit, you eliminate the temptation to try to time the market, which, as you know, is a really bad idea. But the thing is that many people might not realize that not automating your investments can be a mistake for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you plan to invest manually, you are more likely to actually not do it. Life happens. Unexpected expenses, distractions, or simply forgetting to invest can all derail your plans. And by the time you realize you haven't invested that month, you might not have enough money left to do so. Secondly, and more importantly, manual investing exposes you to the psychological traps of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, also known as FUD. The constant flow of market news and predictions can make you question whether you should be investing this month or not, whether your investments are too risky, and so on. But by setting up a direct debit and automating your investments, you take a disciplined, emotion-free approach to investing. This strategy is known as pound cost averaging, whereby you invest a fixed amount regularly regardless of market conditions. So automating your contributions removes the temptation to second guess your investment decisions and ensures you stay on track with your financial goals. Very quickly, before we move on to the last mistake, if you've made it this far and would like to see more content like this, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you. Okay, finally, the most common mistake I see is that many people do not use the Vanguard Life Strategy funds properly. Let me explain what I mean. These funds are collections of other Vanguard funds and are designed to simplify the investing process. They are available in various equity to bond ratios, ranging from the riskiest, which is 100% equity, to the most conservative, which is 20% equity and 80% bonds. To me, these funds are quite expensive, but their main appeal is their simplicity. You don't need to worry about selecting individual funds or managing the balance between bonds and equities yourself. They offer a diversified, pre-built portfolio tailored to different risk levels. However, many investors make the mistake of complicating this simple strategy by mixing life strategy funds with other Vanguard funds, or even with other life strategy funds. Now, combining life strategy funds with other funds isn't necessarily wrong, but it's crucial to understand why you're doing it. For example, you might want to increase your exposure to a specific market, like the US, by adding an S&P 500 fund to your life strategy fund. But in my opinion, if you're a beginner and you're still learning about how investing works, it's often better to stick with just one life strategy fund and ignore everything else. Introducing additional funds can add complexity and confusion to the process, particularly when you're just starting and are still learning the ropes. Another common mistake is selecting a life strategy fund that doesn't align with your risk tolerance or investment timeline. If you have a long-term investment horizon and can tolerate a lot of risk, a fund with a higher equity allocation may make sense. Conversely, if you have a low tolerance to risk and a short investment horizon, you might select a portfolio with high proportion of bonds. Now the issue here is that many people choose to buy a life strategy 80 or 100, but they plan to invest for only 2 to 3 years to grow their house deposit, for example. Sure, there is a good chance that this approach will help them get the high returns that they're after. But if the market were to crash, the heavy equity exposure could result in significant losses, which might force you to sell at a loss when you need that money for your deposit. Now, the issue is that even if you are disciplined and keep your house deposit in a regular savings account, many people, especially first-time buyers, will still find it difficult to buy their first home. So check out this video next to find out why.